Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this webinar on our Sri Lanka Financial Diaries report. I'm Shereel, Gojo's head of impact, and I'm going to be moderating the webinar today. I'm going to give my colleagues Yoshi and Mercy a few seconds to introduce themselves. Yoshi, would you like to start?
Yes, I'm Yoshi. I am a researcher at Gojo.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all today. So I'm Merslin Manoj. I'm also working as a researcher, part of the impact team.
Great. Thanks, Yoshi and Mercy. We're also going to be joined later in the webinar by the CEO of our company in Sri Lanka, Sejaya. So we'll look forward to hearing from Rizanth later on. I'm just going to start with a quick introduction to Gojo for those of you who might not be so familiar to what we do. Gojo was founded in 2014 with the vision of creating a world where everyone can determine their own future. And our mission is to extend financial inclusion across the globe. We're a Tokyo-based holding company of inclusive financial service providers operating in South and Southeast Asia, Central Asia and the Caucasus, and Sub-Saharan Africa. As of March this year, Gojo Group serves 3.4 million clients across the globe. You can see some statistics about our clients on this slide. Our business model is to raise funds from like-minded investors and to channel them into new and current group companies which are aligned with our mission. So what we do is we identify and we invest in financial service providers which are aligned with our social mission and which serve low to medium income people in developing countries. We eventually aim to take a majority stake. At the same time, we also support group companies to scale up and improve their services by negotiating debt funding for them, working on improving their governance processes, helping them implement new technologies, and using data to learn about the outcomes and experiences of clients. So that was a really quick overview of what Gojo does. I'm going to hand over to Mercy now to take us through the highlights from the report we recently published.
So hello, everyone. Greetings once again. Pleasure to be sharing our findings, our observations from our research with you all today. And at the outset, I would start by saying this, that what we are presenting today are the ground realities observed through data analysis and field visits and further follow-up conversations. So this webinar is based on our first report we published on Sri Lanka Diaries. And before we start, a word on the title of the report. We started our data collection in late 2021 when globally everyone was trying to step out of COVID-19. Yet in Sri Lanka, the people went through severe economic crisis and with high inflation where essential commodities doubled or tripled. What we observed through the data was how families survived, what are the coping mechanisms they implemented, and what steps they took to adapt to the circumstances. And so we kept this title, Resilience and Resourcefulness. So having said that, let's dive in. So on project overview, we covered around 9 areas, rural and semi-urban areas in different provinces in Sri Lanka. Roughly, we worked around 100 households when we started the project. And by the end of the project, we had 95 households. And if you ask the question, like what kind of data that you collected, it was daily cash flow data of the households of all income members, earning members living in the same household. And the duration of the data collection was roughly around 2.5 years from late 2021 to early 2024. And we also collaborated with Sparkwind Research, a local research agency in Sri Lanka. And I also want to especially mention here our group company, Gojo's group company in Sri Lanka, Sejaya Microcredit, especially their SPMs in charge helped us, supported us throughout our field visits during our data collection. Yeah, moving on. So in terms of methodology, this is a very brief overview. The diarist self-recorded the daily transactions in notebooks, which was distributed specially by the Gojo team. And these notebooks had special format to record inflows and outflows. And the second step was Gojo trained enumerators collected these entries through via photographs on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, and discussed important conversations with them like major incomes, expenditures, any investments, loan details. So they had further conversations on that. And then there was a dedicated data entry team which translated these data for us, mainly because these data entries were collected in Sinhala and Tamil languages. So this local research agency helped us in translation and digitization. And the most important step is data validation. So Gojo researchers did routine checks, weekly and monthly checks to go through the data, look into income and expenditure, loans and savings, balance checks, savings, all these details. And then if there is any discrepancies, we had further follow-up conversation with the enumerators and the diarist to have a better clarification of their livelihood. So moving on. Looking into the demographics, 72% of the record keepers were women. And in some households, we also saw older children supporting in recording the cash flow of their households. And we also saw a very high literacy rate among these income segment that we worked with. 73% of them had completed secondary school education. And when compared to Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Cambodia Financial Diaries, we did see this, that the literacy rate of this income segment or the low income segment people that we worked with was much higher than the people that we worked in Cambodia Financial Diaries. Moving on. When we look into the age group that we worked, we had wide range of age group people represented in the project. And the oldest diarist that we worked with was almost 69 years old when we started the project. Next. So this is generally our approach that we took during the data analysis process. This is a small infographic to explain in simple terms from bottom to top. What we observed here was, excuse me, so let me just pause a minute. Is there any background noise from me, or is it okay? Is it all right?
All good.
Okay. All right, so sorry for the interruption. So let me continue. The first step that we did was a cash flow analysis of individual households, looking into the income and the expenditure. And the second step that we looked into was the financial services that people used, mainly looking into the loans, the savings, insurances, if there is any, and foreign remittances, and so on. And the third step that we looked into was mainly on household resilience, looking into what kind of personal shocks or income shocks they went through and how did they overcome that. And the fourth step that we generally looked into was the overall trends and patterns on the livelihood outcomes into these households. This is the general approach that we took while we analyzed the data. So let's move on. So till now, I was talking about all the theory aspect of it, and here is a practical example. What you see here is a flow chart, a data chart of one of our diarists. So we plot the data, we try to look into the inflows and outflows, and we put them in a graph. And this is a small representation, and we have highlighted few major transactions in the chart. So this diarist, we observed that they had 3 different income sources: fishery, agriculture, and foreign remittances. And we also have highlighted that they had 2 major paddy income sales, and one income was really a lump sum income that came in to the household. And we also see there are both informal and formal loans. They have access to gold loan from an institution. And when we digged into where did the funds go, we also observed that house construction and well construction were the major areas where these funds went into. So this is the general process that we go through for individual household. I would also say that to achieve this kind of a chart for each household, it takes a considerable effort. We go into very in-depth data cleaning and then identifying the transactions and then categorizing them to achieve this kind of info. So let's move on. So for the overall cash flow, I'll hand over to Yoshi.
Okay. So let me talk you through this table. Even though I know it's not the kind of thing that works well on a presentation slide, probably. There's so many small numbers packed in here, but don't worry, I'm not going to walk you through each number one by one. This table shows all the transactions recorded during our Financial Diaries study, covering over 2 years across 95 households. What I really want to highlight here is that we organized all transactions into 4 broad categories. In the top left, we have income, and in the bottom left, expenses. On the right-hand side, top section is financial inflows, and the bottom is a financial outflows. So inflows to the households are at the top, outflows at the bottom, and regular one-off transactions are on the left side, while financial transactions, those involving a reverse flow at another time, are on the right. By financial transactions, we mean things like loans and savings. You borrow money now and repay it later, no? Or you repay money that was borrowed earlier, or you withdraw savings that were deposited in the past, or you make deposit and you withdraw it in the future. The separating those into right-hand side of the table isn't always easy. Some cases like a formal loan repayments are straightforward, but others aren't. For example, if someone receives money from a relative, is it more like a gift and should go on the left side, or more like a loan and should go on the right side? That's often not clear at the time. Still, we try to classify all flows as carefully as possible. Now, we think this table is one of the most fascinating aspects of the financial diaries. For example, among income flows in the top left, how much comes from wage labor compared to business or agri-farming income? Or how much comes from remittances sent by family members working far away or as gift? Or among the expenses in the bottom left side, how much is spent on food, or what about ceremonies or home construction? And how do those compare to the amount financed by loans? These days let you explore those comparisons. It's a kind of fun to play around with. And if you're curious, the full version is in the report. And I encourage you to take a closer look probably with the calculator in your hand. And if you have questions, please feel free to email us at any time. And of course, this table compresses all transactions over the entire time period into one snapshot. But if you look at the data over time, things get even more interesting. So we will start to get into that in the next slide, but for now, I'll hand it over to Marcy.
Okay, thank you, Yoshi. So let's move on. Firstly, to take a deep dive into the income realities. So among the households that we worked with, most of the households were on daily wages and some were on weekly wages. Hence, it is not a stable income that we observed. And so, families to cope up with these fluctuating incomes engaged in diverse income sources. So to give you an example, here we show the charts or the inflows of a Matugama diarist. Firstly, we show his wages, then his agricultural income, the gifts, and the remittances that he received during the research period. So this diarist, the husband was a sales agent, but his income abruptly stopped because of a medical emergency. And secondly, when you look at his agricultural income, so he owned paddy and banana plantation, but yet the income heavily fluctuates throughout the research period. And so to cope up and sustain his household, the family members gave him cash gifts. There are foreign remittances that came in. All these helped this household to sustain and to also meet their medical needs. So, and this is one particular household, and there are other households in the project which also received government subsidies. So, regular government subsidies. So, some of you may know in Sri Lanka, there is a Samruddhi welfare program and a Swesma welfare program. So, people received cash gifts from the government, especially the low income households. So, the point that we are trying to say through this is these households in this income segment used diverse income sources to manage their livelihood. So to income estimation was really a challenging effort for us to put them into any specific category, especially for those who are working on daily and weekly wages. So let's move on. So naturally, as the income fluctuates and people are looking into diverse sources, loans were integral part of these households. And what we observed during our research period, if you can see, in just these 2 years, 541 loan transactions were observed. And among these, 472 were informal loans. So this is one of our key observations. Informal loans dominated throughout the research period among this income segment people. When we looked into the loan value, we have shown that in the chart, 42% were institutional loans. And when we further segmented to see what are the informal income sources, we first identified that the topmost category was the relatives, the close family network people took money from. And the important reason they shared was like no income rate, no interest rates, or almost nil interest rates, or some people carried very less interest rates. Another key factor was flexible loan repayments. They could pay anytime they want. And another second category was private lenders. So though the private lenders charged heavy interest rates, what we observed during our field visits is that the households did not really the households were not really aware of the interest rates. That was one of their criteria when they went for the private lenders. So to give you a context towards this, during our field visit, one of our diarists explained to us that they took a 50,000 loan from a private lender, and they would pay every day 1,050 rupees to close this loan. So, and the time period they took was 2 months to close this particular loan. So if you see, this is a daily wage earner's home, and they made around 3,500 to 4,500 rupees per day. So for them to set aside 1,050 rupees is kind of affordable, and they aim to complete this report in this loan in a very short period of time. So just to give you a context, I gave this example. What they see is the affordability based on their cash flow, how much they can pay to the loan repayment. And another key factor during our field visits that we found was many of these households lacked eligibility documents so that they cannot access institutional loans. So we are actually writing our second report on Sri Lanka Diaries. It is coming up, so we will cover this in detail. For time being, I'll say informal loans dominated during this research period among this income segment. So let's move on. So now, when we looked into where did the funds go, did the people use the funds for the intended purposes? And what we observed was the topmost category for which the loan funds were used was loan repayment. Loans taken to repay other loans, loan refinancing, we observed. We did see a vicious debt cycle among certain households where they take loan from one place and pay to another place just to maintain their credit worthiness. And the second category that we saw was house construction, asset building happening in phases. And another category was small businesses. We saw grocery shops, tea shops, equipment purchases, small business investments happening with these funds. And another interesting category that we observed was the liquid cash. There were funds taken as reserves to meet emergencies, especially during the economic crisis, the 2022 to early 2023 economic crisis. So in all these loan purposes, we saw gold loans were interspersed. People used gold-backed loans to achieve these purposes. And so we will cover this in the next slide. Let's move. Yeah, gold loan. This is one of our key finding, key observation, we'll say. And it is very unique for certain countries. Maybe it is not very popular in the other places, or maybe it is not applicable in other places. In certain countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and even in some Middle East countries and African nations, people possess gold jewelry and gold loans are offered in these countries. With respect to Sri Lanka, gold loans are very popular. People use small gold items as collateral for quick access of funds. And it also involves very minimal paperwork. And these funds can be used for various purposes. We have shown two different charts where how the loans have been used and what kind of distribution that we saw. And what we saw in the records were like 12 to 30% annual interest rates observed for these gold loans. And many of these gold loans were very small scale, below 50,000 rupees. Yet there are few outliers. But in this income segment, people preferred a smaller, manageable credit with gold loans. So let's move on. Just to touch upon a little bit of savings, out of the households that we worked with, we observed only 40% of the households had bank savings transactions during our research period time. So Gojo did a financial intervention just to observe the savings patterns. What we did was we distributed savings tills, locally manufactured savings tills, wooden tills and clay tills to these households to observe what kind of savings patterns that we see. So if you see in the chart, there is a yellow line shown. We distributed around November 2022, and you can observe the deposit transactions really shot up to a considerable amount after the savings tills was distributed. Yet the amount that was saved was pretty much very small. And mainly because of economic crisis and all the essential commodities, the prices were very high. We observed this kind of pattern and we have written in detail in our report. I will invite you to read the report. So let's move on. The next slide I will hand over to Yoshi. It is a follow-up of what the previous discussion that we had.
In this slide, I'd like to talk about one of the major events that took place during our Financial Diaries study in Sri Lanka. Something our data helps us understand in detail, the economic crisis. As many of you know, the Sri Lankan rupee sharply depreciated starting in early 2022. The orange line here shows the official exchange rate as reported by the central bank. And following a decline in foreign reserves that began during COVID period, the government effectively defaulted on its debt in spring 2022, pushing the country into full-blown economic crisis. There were widespread fuel shortages, long power cut, endless queues at gas stations, or inflation driven by surging importing prices. Daily life became incredibly difficult at the time. Our Sri Lanka Financial Diaries project began collecting data in November 2021, just before the crisis took off. The power cut and fuel restrictions made running the project extremely challenging. It was really tough, but interestingly, it was not always easy to detect the crisis in the data, at least not right away. But the green line here shows the percentage of household spending that went to food, tracked from just after our study began to April 2023, when the economy started to stabilize. As inflation took hold and uncertainty increased, diarists quickly began cutting back on non-essential expenses. Some even stopped paying their electricity bills altogether, just leaving them stacked on the table. And as a result, the share of food in total spending rose sharply from around 30 to 40% at the beginning up to nearly 70% its peak. What surprised me was that these behavioral shift preceded the most dramatic movement in the official exchange rate. Even before the broader economic picture was clear, people sensed trouble and acted to protect their household finances. And of course, people cannot survive on food alone. And as time passed, even with prices still sky high, they had to resume spending in other areas. Whether or not we should call that a return to normal, probably not. But we saw the food spending share begin to gradually decline again, still ahead of the official exchange rate stabilizing. This is I believe this is exactly the kind of insight that's only possible through Financial Diaries. But anyway, so please go to the next one.
Thank you, Yoshi. So moving on, towards the end of the project, we collected feedbacks from the people who were part of the Financial Diaries, asking them how was their experience towards Financial Diaries, maintaining these records, and what kind of change, what kind of observation or impact that they had in their livelihood. So people shared many things openly. I've just put some few details here. One of the detail people shared was lack of stable employment. And we can reconcile that when we look into our data. We do see that these daily wages had highly fluctuating income. And also we worked in Jaffna district in the Chawakacheri area, so with the fishermen community. So some of these fishermen households also reported they need loans for business continuity regularly. So they need loans and they need affordable loans. So we could observe that even in the data as well, how the fishermen need loans every 3 to 4 months through our data as well. And there are others who talked about towards the end of the project how livelihoods have changed. Somebody has written that we eat 3 meals a day today. We send our children to private institutions. We buy clothes on festive occasions. So these are some of the comments that came as in very heartwarming comments, but also we could reconcile these comments with the data that we have. So let's move on. And finally, to finish with, here is a very short summary. These are only some key findings because of the time that we have. Just to sum it up, when it comes to income, what we saw was most of the households rely on daily and weekly wages, and half of the households relied on diverse income sources to cope up with these fluctuating incomes, and it included remittances and government subsidies. And one key finding is that multiple income sources not necessarily indicated sufficiency or financial stability, but rather it was a coping strategy or an adaptability to maintain unstable incomes. Secondly, on the loans, we did see that the heavy reliance among these income segment on the informal networks, mainly because of familial support, and also on private lenders, basically because of accessibility of funds, immediate access of funds, and also loan repayment options, and also to an extent, trust was another factor. And when it comes to loan purposes, we did see that a large share of funds went into debt management. We also saw asset building and business investments as well. And when it comes to, in terms of loan repayments, for private lender loans, some households prefer daily and weekly loan repayments because it aligned with their cash flow patterns. And gold loan was one of our key findings. 64% of the institutional loans were gold-backed loans, and households preferred small, manageable credit based on the low interest and the quick access of funds, minimal paperwork, and the flexible loan repayment options. Gold loan was a versatile tool people used in this income segment. And secondly, to touch upon ceremonies, we did observe weddings and funerals imposed huge financial strain to the households in Sri Lanka, especially funerals had a lot of social obligations and religious obligations where they give almsgiving. They have a food feast where they invite the whole villagers to come and they feed them, and also all the religious priorities they had. So this forced them to rely on cash from the relatives, local communities, and also from money lenders. So these are some of our key findings. And we have given some recommendations based on this kind of income segment. What would be an affordable and what would be a responsible finance for this kind of income segment, what the stakeholders can do in the region. I'd invite you to read the report. And before I close, I also want to mention that all these households who participated were very randomly chosen based on their willingness to participate in the program. And these are not our clients. This is purely a market research data. And to whom we developed a rapport and trust over a period of time so that they could self-record their data for us and so that we could present this data with you all. So with this, I close and I hand over to Cheryl for our further discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Mercy and Yoshi. So we're going to move into our Q&A now. So I'm going to invite Rizanth to kick us off by saying a few words about his reaction to the report as the CEO of our partner company, Sejaya, in Sri Lanka, and also about how Sejaya plans to use the findings from this report. Just to everybody attending while Rizanth is speaking, please do feel free to put questions in in the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer as many as we can before the end of the session. Over to you, Rizanth.
Yeah. So first and foremost, it's both pleasure and privilege to be in the panel and to share the panel. And I think this is one of the most inspiring and most meaningful human-centered initiative that Gojo has undertaken, which is Financial Diary project. I strongly believe before you give a inclusive finance, we name it inclusive finance and reliable finance. It is very, very important for us to understand the daily financial transaction, maybe how our clients earn, spend, save, borrow, and how they cope up with their immediate financial shocks, such as maybe unexpected family need or something like that. So I think that is where the Financial Diaries comes into place and throw us some light. In fact, as a CEO of Sejaya Microcredit, I'm really glad and thankful for the survey team. They come up with such a wonderful insights. I think I can add on a little bit on the insight that I have gained from, especially from this. So it is very shocking to see. Now we have surveyed roughly 100 odd clients. So out of 100 clients, over the 3 years period of time, each person has borrowed more than 5 times, actually 6 times. So 5 are from informal and 1 are from formal lenders. So it is shocking. They are going to informal lenders not because they are cheaper, but they are easily accessible. And so it's opening our eyes to see our reach. So we should be so close to clients. We should be in a place where the client can come and reach us and get their financial assistance. So that is one. And also another thing which I notice, irregular income pattern. Irregular income pattern is something that torment our clients because some are seasonal, some are maybe some are may not be seasonal, but they are finding it very challenging to cope up with their daily needs, arising daily needs. So I understand that from the report, irregular income pattern and the trust that they have with the informal lender, because I realize what they borrow from the formal lender, they are using it to settle informal lenders. So they are borrowing bigger loan and settling the smaller loans. And again, they go and borrow smaller loans to settle the bigger loan. So this is the vicious cycles that they are living in. And of course, this survey finding has opened a way for us to think and redesign our products which are conducive and suitable for clients, basically pawning, maybe gold investment. I see pawning is the less risky and immediate source of source of financial access, and seasonal. So these are some of the things that Sejaya can think in the future. So I'll stop with this. I can add on because I'm so impressed with the report when Mercy was sharing the report with us first time and I read through the report. So there are a lot of interesting facts that I can share, but I stop with this and over to the other panelists.
Great, thank you so much, Rizanth. So I'm gonna kick us off with a question. We've received quite a number of questions in chat in the Q&A box. So I'm gonna start with, let's start with, I think as some of the attendees might know, Gojo has managed 3 financial diary projects to date. This one in Sri Lanka and one in Cambodia, and we are collaborating with Stuart Rutherford on the Hersheypara Diaries in Bangladesh as well. So I want to ask, I think particularly Yoshi and Mercy, how do you feel this project was different from the other 2 projects that we've done? And reflecting on the methodology of all these projects, what might you do differently if you were to do another Financial Diaries project?
Mercy, you go.
All right. Yeah. So when we look into the Cambodia Financial Diaries project, we worked almost roughly around 150 households and wide provinces that we covered. And one of the key factors that I observed was the literacy rate is pretty low in the Cambodia Financial Diaries. So the methodology has to cater according to the literacy level. So that involved the enumerators visiting them regularly and then taking their income and expenditures, and they personally recorded. The enumerators recorded. So it comes with its own pros and cons when you do that methodology. Secondly, it involved a lot of costs. And that's one factor. So when it comes to Sri Lanka Financial Diaries, here the literacy rate is pretty high and people self-recorded their data. So there is a lot of further information And there's a lot of persona that comes along with each of the households that recorded the data. And also over a period of time, we could trace and ask and further conversations that we can go. And people also shared an element of financial literacy towards the end of the project because they could look back and learn from their data. They could adjust their spending behavior. So there is a level of financial literacy also came in with Sri Lanka Financial Diaries. So that is the major difference that I see. It both has its own pros and cons. But personally, I would say Sri Lanka Financial Diaries was personally for me, had a lot of personality, unique personality in the data. And number two, for future, yeah, we can try latest options like digital diaries. We can try, but when we go in for digitization of financial diaries, I do think that persona can be lost. How much people would go into details to record the data. Another option is we can use aid AI. They use the power of AI to go into looking into machine learning and find out some trends and patterns. Those are some areas that we can do and enhance data analysis of financial diaries. That's my personal thought.
Yeah, the methodology difference I think is big. And in this Sri Lanka project, actually we distributed the notebook to the households, all of the households, and we asked them to write down by their own. And of course we asked like how did you manage it? So who wrote it and when exactly you wrote it, or how you wrote it. So typically, I don't know, before the dinner and after the dinner, typically young guys, son or daughter, trying to summarize the all transactions on the day, and household members discuss about their way to spend money, and if you look at the notebook, it's too interesting to summarize it into a report anyway. For example, I don't know. I knew it, but Sri Lanka people, I think, is very keen on recording food items, like this kind of spices, food items. I think it's fascinating. But anyway, so my point here is like the way, the methodology. I think it's inspiring. And in the future, probably you might want to try probably slightly different methodologies. But anyway, let me stop.
Thanks. And just to stay on methodology for a little bit longer, there's a question about how keeping the diary impacts financial literacy. And Mercy, I think you touched on that a little bit in your presentation. Now, I think this is an interesting question because we actually did kind of an RCT in Cambodia to compare a control group who did not do diaries with a group that did do diaries. And we did a baseline and an endline survey to kind of look at financial management between the two groups. So Yoshi, would you like to say a bit about what we found in Cambodia and how you think diaries affects the financial literacy of the diarists?
Yeah, that's also a hot topic. And in Cambodia project, we did a kind of an RCT experiment there. And the hypothesis or assumption was like the Financial Diaries project it can be kind of the chance for household to rethink about your household management. And the result was a kind of a so-so. I don't want to spend too much time on it here, but details are on the report of Cambodia project on Gojo website and also the JICA website. So please look at it. We always interested in how these financial diary project affect on diarist households. Yeah, that's true.
Marcy, would you like to add to that or at all? Or
Yeah, so in the Cambodia project, yeah, there was a collaboration with JICA, and the JICA researchers were also involved in. Yeah, some of the responses through the research that came out was there is an increased financial literacy when compared to those who worked with the Financial Diaries project and those who did not work with the Financial Diaries project, because there was a baseline project that was undertaken and an inline survey undertaken, and there were families chosen from whom the data collection was done, and there were families who were excluded, and only the surveys were done. So Financial Diaries is real-time data tracking. So it is not like a one-time survey where people go ask questions and make a report out of it. Since it's a real-time data tracking, it gives an improved awareness for the households about their own data, how much income comes, how much loan repayments they make, or what are the expenses, what are the unnecessary expenses. So that gives to an extent a level of financial literacy when we compare with those who work on the financial diaries or not. Yeah, that's generally the view that is presented in the report.
thank you. Now, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions before we start to wrap up. So there's a question specifically for Rizanth about how you can use the data to pilot Sejaya, and what do you see as the main purpose of the financial diaries?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, there are a lot of insights and eye-openers for us, starting from your segment. Financial, because now we have not targeted so far the daily earners, daily wages, people who are depending on daily wages. So that can be one eye-opener could be how you position, how you target your target segment. That can be one area that we can work on. Second, what we are offering, it is something affordable for the grassroots level people, maybe daily wages, daily earners. So you can come up with a specific product depending on their cash inflows and outflows. You can design. So it is again helping us to design our product designing, and also positioning of our branches, where we can position more, and what sort of repayment methodology that is suitable, conducive for this market, especially for this segment that we are talking about. And what are the area that we are losing, or what are the aspects that we can consider to serve this client without losing them to another competitor, maybe banks, or maybe, because I know the microfinance came to a world or came to Sri Lanka market to protect these grassroots level people going to a loan sharks, like local money lenders or those who are charging exorbitant interest rate. But still, people are going to this exorbitant interest rate, people who are charging exorbitant interest rate. So therefore, which still the work has not done fully. Yes, half done, I would say, not fully done. So it's some more to be done. So therefore, it's a eye-opener, starting actually pushing us to think from product designing, target segmenting, targeting our client, and conducive products, and what are the other additional benefits that we can deliver to this customer, this segment.
Thank you, Rizanth. Now, I think we have time for one more question, and I think that one of my favorite things about diaries is really just getting to know each diarist and their story. So I want our last question to be about diarist stories. So the question is, did you have any aha moments or any surprises that challenged your initial hypothesis or assumptions about the diarists? Any specific diarist examples?
Okay,
Mercy?
I'll I'll go for it. I did share this with Rizanth and Rizanth's team in a previous session. This is something that really surprised me. So we worked with the fishermen community in the Jaffna district in Chavakacheri. So there were many households who were part of our diary program. So one of the diarists, he took a private lender loan and he also took an institutional loan. So when I observed his loan repayment behavior, so from the institution, he took 50,000 rupees. He paid monthly 5,000 rupees to this institution. And to the private lender, he paid every day 800 rupees. So when we do our math, so he is able to pay, he's a fisherman, he earns daily wages. So he is able to pay in a month roughly around 24,000 to this private lender. See, but for the institution, he takes 50,000 rupees. He will pay for the next 1 year to complete that loan amount. But with the private lender, he finishes that loan amount in 2 months' time. What a contrast that we see based on who the loan source is. That's number one. And number two, these fishermen also shared that every 3 to 4 months, they need to change their fishing nets and gears and equipments. So they need funds for business continuity. So interestingly, he can go again to the private lender because he will finish the loan in 2 months' time. So after 3-4 months, he can go back to the private lender to take the next loan. But with the institution, he may not be able to go back again, though the interest rates are less. But for him, the interest rates does not play an important criteria. They don't know the interest rates. They are not aware of the interest rates. What they see is how much I earn every day and what can I pay on a daily basis. So this was a huge surprise for me. One of the key stories that surprised me in the diaries.
Thank you, Mercy. Yoshi, would you like to go?
I want to listen to you, Cheryl.
All right. So I think I'll share a story that really stuck with me since my first visit to the diarists. During the economic crisis Yoshi and I visited the diarists in a few locations in December 2022. And we met one particular diarist in Monaragala, quite a rural area. And her husband had passed away just a couple of months ago from complications of diabetes. It was a really difficult time for her. So there were two things that stuck out to me from this story. The first was that on the day that they had to rush her husband to the hospital when he collapsed, our enumerator in Monaragala was the one who took her husband to the hospital. Not because she was the enumerator, just because she was her neighbor. The second thing, and then, of course, she had to take a loan for the funeral, as most of our diarists do when someone in their family passes away. But in Monaragala, as some of our locations have, they had what's called a funeral society, where people in the local neighborhood pay every month into a communal pot. And when somebody in the funeral society has a death in the family, the funeral society puts on a funeral for that person, meaning with, tables and chairs and music and food and so on. And it doesn't cost that person anything at that time. When her husband passed away, one of our other diarists, who was the head of the local funeral society, organized everybody to come and put on a funeral. And for me, it was just a really interesting example of a community in action to support each other. But the complicated thing was that because her husband was the main breadwinner for the family, and the diarist herself had issues with her back and couldn't work very much, she was still struggling, even after all of this community support, she was still struggling with her future. She still didn't know what she was going to do for money. And her 16-year-old daughter was thinking of dropping out of school so that she could earn money for the family. So the diarist basically had a choice between letting her 16-year-old daughter drop out of school, or ruining her own health by going out to work more for the family. So I think for me, it's just an example, firstly, of how communities can really come together to support each other, but also of how sometimes, honestly, that's still not enough, and people still have to make really hard choices. Yeah. Okay. On that note, we do have to close this session. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to everybody's questions. So let me just say a couple of things to finish. I just want to make a general comment, and I think maybe this answers some people's questions, actually. I want to make a general comment about the wider value of financial diaries. A question that we very often get asked is, how do we make use of financial diary data? And we usually say in response that we use financial diary data to see where the things that people want to do with their money diverge from the tools and services that are available for managing their money. And this therefore tells us how we can improve our company's products and services. And while this is definitely true, I actually personally think that the biggest benefit of financial diaries is the repository of stories that they generate. Like the stories that we just told, that Mercy and I just told, because these stories from real life are complex and they're not neat. They're not easily categorizable. And they help us, and having these stories always, in our minds helps us as financial service providers to always see clients as whole people whose decisions are influenced by the context of where they live, the people around them, the options available to them, and the events that happen to them. And I think that this is the biggest benefit of financial diaries for anyone trying to design human-centered financial services. So I just want to add, by the way, that building on what we've learned from our 3 financial diary projects, Gojo is starting to consider offering consulting services on financial diaries to anybody interested. So this is just a little pitch to say that if you are interested in starting a financial diaries project or learning from an existing financial diaries project that we have on hand, please do reach out to us after this webinar. We'd love to work together. Finally, I also want to say that we released our impact report for the past year today in English and Japanese. So Gojo Group grew significantly in the past year with several new investments, particularly into Baobab Group in Africa, Bank Arvand in Tajikistan, and Credo Bank in Georgia. So this year's report looks at all our countries of operations and features stories and interviews from across all of these countries. Please do take a look at the report and stay tuned for our next webinars in English and Japanese on the impact report. Thank you very much for joining us today. When you leave the webinar, you will be asked to fill in a survey. Please do give us your feedback. It will really help us. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.